Ooh, it is a good day. You can maybe figure out why I, in particular, am so happy today. We have new buffs, and not just any buffs. Last Build 4 recap buffs. This time they didn't skip them, because sadly they did that with Last Build 3. Who knows why? There's a lot of servants they could have buffed, but yes, now we got new buffs. 3 of them. First of all, as you can see, Lakshmibai. Good old Lakshmi. For getting her first ever buffs. Great. Then we got Nezha for another buff. Cool. And then the reason why I am just overjoyed is obviously because the first Jinako also received her first ever buffs. Hooray! Now, they're all skill buffs, as you can probably see. But yeah, we're going to be talking about them one at a time here. Time for some buff breakdown. It's been a while, but yeah, I'm always trying to do these whenever I can when new stuff is out, so let's go. So we're going to talk about Lakshmibai first here. So let's just take a look at what's different. Again, for more in-depth servant, opinions, you can always refer to the tier lists. And in this one, you will be seeing the placements as well. But I'm just going to focus on the changes here. So they buffed the third skill. Now, what was the skill before the buff? Let's just cover that real fast. It was a self-only buff. 1-time 3-turn guts. And then a demerit of minus 20% debuff rest for 3 turns. Not a deal breaker, honestly. Just a minor annoyance, if anything. And then a very vital part is the party buff success rate up for 3 turns. Very vital in the sense that literally the other skills she has have party buffs that are all RNG based. So if you don't have this up, chances are you might miss all these nice buffs you could be giving to your party. So again, this was the most important part about this skill, if anything. And it used to be a 7-turn cooldown. So before the buff, I would say this skill, it was good in the sense that it had this, but besides that, it's not an amazing skill. It was just something that she needed to have, right? But now, let's see, there's actually quite a bit of changes here. So first of all, cooldown reduced by 1 turn. I'll get to that in a second, why that is actually amazing. But then we got 2 new effects as well. So self quick up, now she has that, love it, up to 20% for 3 turns. Again, it's good, it's a great buff because it's her main card type anyway. And it's a damage buff. She didn't have anything that, collided with this in the multiplication table thingy, if you know what I mean. And then also self-MP generation for 3 turns up to 20%. Now, your first thought might be, oh my god, she must be amazing at looping now. Real quick before I show you numbers and whatnot, she's not amazing. This is better, obviously. And with Summer Scotty being a thing as well, that also helps with her looping. But still, I'm just gonna lay it on the table. She's not amazing, but certainly an option now, especially for the people that really like her. Now, let's talk about why the cooldown reduction, first of all, is so important. Remember this part, the buff success rate for 3 turns. So, it affects the other skills she has. And if you look at this, they all have 6-turn cooldowns. Or rather, at least, this one at least, well, this was 5 turns, but this was a 6-turn cooldown. Because the fact that this was a 7-turn cooldown made it so much more awkward to use, right? Because then you didn't always have that thing necessarily. Now, still, this is a bit faster, but it's fine. But it still helps a lot with this. Because again, you don't want to miss these buffs. These are actually some good buffs. Like, these can actually save your ass on the second skill. So, with this buff, granted you have them on the same level, you should always have this up by the time you're using at least the second skill. And you might honestly want to even delay using this until you have the guaranteed buffs. Because there's a good chunk of star generation and crit damage as well on a good uptime. So, something to think about. So, overall now, without, saying anything else, this skill on a 6-turn cooldown with all these effects, that is an amazing skill, honestly. It's a great skill. Even if, well, I guess now we're going to talk about how much it changes stuff. But as a skill on its own, it's obviously just really good. So let's talk about the numbers briefly. And I just told you that she's not going to be like an amazing looper, but here you go anyway. Shout out to Jord for updating the list as well. And I'm probably going to include this in the description of this video as well for people that are always asking about it. So he has theory crafted 2 comps that are very possible. Not super easy to do, mind you, because you still, for both of them, you do need a ruler, Summer, Scotty. That's signified by the RS here. So you're either going to run triple Scotty with 2 rulers, or double ruler, and you can also use Shufu as a like a budget option if you don't have that normal Scotty as well. Now obviously the normal Scotty version is just going to be better, as you can see from the damage numbers. And regarding the damage numbers, if you are going to run triple Scotty, this is MP1 damage on neutral. So when you think about it, this is great for a 4-star servant on MP1 for neutral. Like if you have the option of triple Scottying it up, she's actually legit. It is again very demanding, yes, but actually a legit option now. So again, all those, you know, handful of Lakshmi fans are gonna be really happy about this. Granted, you have the Scotties to go with her. Now, the Shufu variant, the budget variant, whatever you want to call it, it's not even that budget again because you need rules, double ruler, but it does have quite a bit lower numbers. But if you are running her in the best case scenario, which is against Lancers, keep in mind this neutral damage, honestly, I would say it works. It would also work. But besides Lancers, you would probably not do this, honestly. So, still fine, I suppose, yeah. Still fine, right? Not too bad. Not too shabby at all. And this is running a Traces, by the way. So a 50% CE that is free. So that's also something worth noting here. So the real problem is just getting those ruler Scotties, if anything, so. But still, she has more options. So what's there not to like, I guess? In my Saber tier list of this year, I had her placed her on an A tier, which is still pretty good, obviously. A is a solid tier. Mostly not because of farming, because she's a solid just DPS and a pretty decent support at the same time. Like, she was already not bad at all. And I really thought about this, honestly. I thought maybe I'll just keep her there. But honestly, now that she can actually have some legit farming options, especially now that I've seen the numbers as well after the calculations, again, shout out to George for that, I think I can bump her to A+, honestly. I think I can do it. Because her DPS is obviously better, her supporting stays the same, but her farming, most notably, actually is legit now. Yes, it's slightly demanding, of course. It's not the easiest thing to do. You might have better options if you don't have like a Grailed one, Lakshmibai, or something you just like her in general, but it is still very doable, and the numbers are definitely not terrible. So I feel like A+ is fair. So there you go. Lakshmi fans, eating pretty good, I would say. Now, let's talk about Nezha's buff. I'm just gonna flat out say, I think of the 3 buffs we got today, this is the most disappointing one. It's not a terrible buff, but you'll see what I mean, so let's just get into it. So, they buffed Nezha's 3rd skill, and again, how did this skill look before the buff? Well, not very good, huh? On a 5-turn cooldown, you got 1 turn of Absorb, not even quad digits, so on a Lancer, base Absorb 500% might not even guarantee you stars. And then, oh yeah, the self-debuff cleanse. So on a 5-turn cooldown, that is a yikes in my opinion, even for a 4-star. That was just not a great skill. But now, let's see what they did. Cooldown remains the same, and old effects also remain exactly the same. But now we got 3 new things, and you might be saying 3 new things, that must be amazing, right? Well, let's just see what they are first. So, a self-damage mod against demonic enemies for 3 turns, 50%. So the number itself is actually very solid. And also self-defense up against demonic enemies for 3 turns. And again, 30% defense up for 3 turns on a 5-turn cooldown. Again, very, very solid. And then the third effect is a up to 15-star bomb. Which honestly, this is the one part I actually kind of like, because it had a 1-turn absorb anyway. So it makes at least her being able to have a nice, easy crit turn. Even if the downtime for this skill is still pretty massive in terms of the crit relevancy. But here's where I think the problem kind of happens. I assume this is a lore buff. I just don't really see the demonic thing being very useful to Nezha. Now, if you're wondering what kind of numbers we're dealing with here, in terms of the best case scenarios when Nezha can do 2.0x damage, we have 7 total servants that fall under demonic, and that's including both archers and berserkers and alter ego, which I also, and that's not 2.x damage, but you know, you can still use knights. So only if you want 2.x damage, it's only 5 servants, 2 archers and 3 berserkers. So it's mostly a miss when it comes to it. Obviously, there are still enemies, there are non-servants that can be demonic as well, even on the challenging side of content, because I still don't think Nezha is really a farmer, mostly a DPS, but they're very few and far between, I would say. Now, because I thought, I myself thought of what could they have done instead. Now, let's say they wanted to do a similar approach and have a power mod and a like a defense up as well. Just, if this was a divine thing instead of demonic, here are the numbers. Instead of 7 total, including alter ego, there would be 26 total for archers, berserkers, and alter ego. Now that would have been really good. That would have been just amazing as an example for the modifiers instead of the demonic, divine that is. It's a huge difference, isn't it? As a skill, it's still really amazing. But I have in my opinion, it's just a bit misplaced on Nezha, and I assume again it's more than it's because of lore, and that's basically what's going to be a thing on the 3rd buff today as well. By the way, yeah, as a skill it's actually good, but just this would be so much better on someone else. So if it was divine instead, for instance, it would have been so much better. Now in terms of Nezha, she's right here. Pretty basically back in the middle. I had her placed on a B+ in my Lancer tier list for this year, and with this I don't think I'm gonna move her. I don't think there is any reason to move her. There are some cases where this buff will actually greatly benefit. For most cases, it's just gonna give her a more solid crit turn, and that's it. That's it. That's the sad reality of this buff. Obviously, it's still a buff that makes her better. Every buff hopefully is. But I don't think this really changes things for Nezha. At least not in a significant way. I'm still gonna keep Nezha on a B+. Not bad, but you can probably do better. Ooh, and then we get to the 3rd and final buff for today. And yes, I am again very happy about this. Now, first of all, if I were to buff Jinako myself, because I've thought about this a lot over the years, I personally would have given her the MP buff. Who knows, maybe it can still happen in the future. So I wouldn't have done a skill buff personally. But hey, I'm still happy she got something to begin with. And even then, the buff itself actually isn't bad. It's not groundbreaking, but it's not bad. So, here we are. And as the theme goes, her 3rd skill also was the one that received the buff. So before the buff, on a 5-turn cooldown, you had a targeted 1-turn invul with 30% MP generation for 1 turn. With a fairly hefty demerit sometimes of a skill seal for the target for 1 turn. Now, the one annoying thing for the skill seal, if anything, a lot of people don't even know this, but if you're skill sealed, your cooldowns do not tick down. So if you were to use this on Jinako herself, this would basically be a 6-turn cooldown unless you cleanse that seal before the next turn happened. So that's the one really annoying thing about skill seal as well. It prevents cooldowns from progressing if it's under your servant. But honestly, even then, this skill wasn't bad by any means. It was a pretty okay defensive-oriented skill with some utility on it. Like, it was still fine. And now, after the buff, again, much like Nezha, all the old stuff, including the cooldown, they all remain the same. But we have 2 new things. First of all, 20 to 30% MP damage. Not for 1 turn, but for 3 turns. That's pretty cool. And then, a 3-turn power mod against lawful alignment enemies, up to 50%, much like Nezha's demonic thingy. So first of all, let's talk about the lawful thing, okay? Now, again, in terms of the numbers, because I counted this as well, if you were to use this on Jinako herself, which obviously is a possibility because she's like a half DPS, half support, there's, much like Nezha, there's not a whole lot of great options. Berserkers and Avengers, there is only I believe 9 Berserkers that are lawful and 3 lawful Avengers. And Avengers is obviously the best case scenario, so... For herself, is still not the best power mod to have in terms of the Moon Cancer class. But again, keep in mind it's targeted, so it's not as awkward as in the case of Nezha. Because you can absolutely bring Jinako as like an off DPS tank slash support. You can bring her like a jack of all trades if you want to. Now, at least in terms of the MP damage, that for herself is actually pretty solid. Now again, I would have preferred a straight up MP upgrade as a buff here over MP damage, but if they were to give her a damage buff, I believe this one was the best they could have done. Because yes, she doesn't have an arts buff herself, but keep in mind, if you pair her with someone like Castoria, she can at least provide an arts buff, while she does not provide an MP damage buff. So this is another new buff that will be also multiplied in the damage calculations. So besides an MP buff, this was probably the second best damage buff they could have given her. But again, keep in mind, it's also targetable, so more supporting for her, I guess, as an option. And now after the buff, another very, very, really good skill on a 5-turn cooldown. Especially if you can deal with that skill still the merit, and chances are you can, because let's say you're running Castoria in the party, you know, you can just sometimes just cleanse it off with her MP as well, as an example, as a common example. So this skill is now very, very strong. Now, in the extra... I think this was part 1, because I had them divided into 2 classes. Extra tier 1, part 1 tier list. I had Jinako placed on A, and I remember getting some... mixed opinions about this, and honestly I kind of do admit it was a bit biased, but now after this buff I think it's very sensible. So much like Nezha, I will not move Jinako at all. Now I think it's a deserved day, if anything. Maybe before this buff, slightly biased, I will admit that, because I'm used to using her a lot, but then again I tend to use one that is really strong, so I feel like now it's just a more sensible A, you know. Now I feel like it's very fair. Maybe slightly biased before this, so there you go. I will not be moving her. I kind of... At the same time, I do kind of wish they made the MP gain 3 turns. Because then she herself would have possibly been able to be used in looping a bit more as well. Because as is, it's like so difficult. And her damage also isn't that amazing either, so... But since they didn't change it, I really can't recommend using her to farm. So I'm gonna be the only crazy guy doing it in the capacity that I can do it to begin with, so. But hey, for challenge quests, more supporting. What's there not to like? So I guess I'm just gonna wrap it up with that. Obviously, none of these 3 buffs are super groundbreaking. If anything, I think the Lakshmi buff definitely makes the most impact for the servants in question. Because again, she has way better farming options now. But I still overall kind of like the buffs. Even the Nezha one, it's not horrible by any means. Even if it's a bit missed with the, you know, niche in question. Again, mostly because of lore, I assume, but, you know, so be it. As a side note, before I end, kind of sad Karna didn't get buffed. A 25% battery shouldn't exist in the modern times. And let's be real, the rest of his kit isn't amazing either, so who knows. Here's hoping they're gonna do something about Karna as well at some point. But with that, this concludes this episode of Buff Breakdown. Please leave a like if you enjoyed it. Definitely helps out. This may or may not come out before the crazy gacha session of today, where I will be trying to roll for MP5 Hijikata. Maybe the gacha comes out first, I don't know, but stay tuned, stay subscribed in case you want to see that. And otherwise, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And a peace out.